Welcome back to the What's Your One More podcast. I am joined today not by my co-host, but a phenomenal guest that I'm super excited to be on the show, Mr. Jared Rice, Executive Director of the Players. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to do it.
We're excited. You are a busy man, by the way, to get you into this room here. And by the way, this is right after the TPC, which I think is probably like your Super Bowl week. Been very, very grueling. We talked a little bit about that pre-show, but you're making a stop by right before you head to the Masters here. So I appreciate that.
No, happy to do it. Glad we could finally connect. You say Super Bowl. I've also described it as a 200,000 person wedding. So there's another way to look at it.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, and going to it the last, 8 years or so, it is exactly that. And you guys put on one hell of an event, and I can't wait to talk about that here. And, again, just thanks for being on the show, joining us in the studio today. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Great. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So, I look at your position and I kind of try to go backwards, and we met years ago. Our wives connected us through our kids at Little Gym. And, I remember some of the things you were telling me, and you've, when you graduated University of South Carolina, and me being a Tennessee guy, it was really not a great
first meeting.
Not a great first meeting, right?
Okay.
But I think we hit it off because my grandparents went there, and I was like, I do have a connection. Ironically, you were the first person to text me after Tennessee lost to South Carolina this year. So,
ironically.
Yeah, it was a great photo of you and the family there.
I wasn't rubbing
at the
it in.
Sandstorm, letting me know. Great environment. I was like, oh, yeah, it was awesome. Thanks. And we also lost our quarterback that day, too. So, but that's not your fault, but congratulations on the victory.
It was pretty big.
But you graduated University of South Carolina, and you've been in sports all your life. I mean, some sort of sports marketing all your career at this point. And you started with, Anaheim right out of, and with Anaheim, it was with the Ducks and with the Angels, correct?
Right. Yeah, and it's sometimes I've been asked this question is like, how'd you pick it? And you feel like people say, all right, I want to be in sport. I love sports, and I want to make a career out of it. And again, this wasn't necessarily a taught or learn. I mean, we don't have to get into nature nerd. It's only 90 seconds in. We don't have to get into nature nurture here. But I knew right away that I loved the idea of fandom, and that really hit me. I played high school sports. I had a cup of coffee in college. Was always connected to it. But I loved how it brought people together. And some of my best memories of with my dad and my family were around a Boston Bruins game. I can tell you exactly what happened, where it was, and why. Yep. And so it always felt like something that I wanted to be involved in not only for making memories for fans, but also to see what it could do for communities. And again, not disparaging other industries, but I just love the idea of, all right, this is something I can really get behind passionately, and just went for it.
Well, sports are the ultimate uniter. It unites people together of all walks of life. It brings you together to cheer for one commonality, whether it's the team you love or not. I think we had Damon West on the show who sat here and he talked about a moment where in his time is that he's like, sports is the ultimate uniter. Like, I had to use that to unite some people, and that's kind of what you're describing there.
Well, fan is short for fanatic.
There you
go. Again, for your listeners, again, they're fanatical about their certain lines of business, and yours has been very, very successful. That's awesome. And like you said, sports has that unique unifier that can bring people together and be pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So at Anaheim, when you were with the Ducks and you were with I think the Anaheim Angels, which another connection we had. My wife's from Anaheim area. She's from the Los Angeles area, so it was kind of interesting. But I think you were really big into the fan experience early on there. Whether it was puck night, whether it's bobblehead night. I've heard a couple of these stories.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. So, but you did some things right out the gate there that just kind of talked a little bit to spoke to what you're a little bit talking about here.
So I think for looking at that, and again, there's career pathing, and to me, the kind of takeaway is choices and balance and taking risks and getting outside of your comfort zone. I had an internship with the Boston Celtics, which was great. Again, it was an hour and a half commute for a free internship, and I got through that, and I said, all right, if I can get through that, I'm in. And in the case of the Ducks and the Angels, I had some opportunities to get back to Boston. I grew up north of Boston, work in the agency world, but taking a risk and seeing the Walt Disney Company, which is an incredible organization related to experience and service. That they were the owners of the Ducks and the Angels at the time. And I said, all right, well, what better way to learn how to really, again, build a great experience and take a risk. Never been to California before, really, and kind of drove out there sight unseen and worked out pretty well.
Yeah, being an original Boston person, you actually have the right to be like, Patriots, yes,
I
been
do.
waiting on this all my life.
That's correct.
Because that's there's a lot of Wagon fans. You are not one of them, by the way.
Steve Grogan, don't get me started. That was the first. That was my original favorite quarterback.
Oh,
so,
man. So yeah, you have the right to cheer for all the championships there and be excited about that. So Anaheim, and then left Anaheim to go to Detroit. Spent some time up there in cold Detroit.
It is cold. It is an extra special kind of cold too. Again, not dissimilar from that first choice. Is went out for a marketing role, fan experience. Yes, I was shooting t-shirt cannons. Or I was driving a giveaway car on the ice. I got a funny story about that too. Anyways, but really again developing fan marketing programs and started to get into selling a little bit. And I realized that there's kind of two tracks, and again, this may transfer beyond sports. Is you can be the person that spends money, marketing, create and generate demand. Those are all very important things. And then there's the person that can go out and bring in revenue, leans on those marketing experts, but has a demand creation responsibility, and then convert and bring business to the organization. And that was the path that I said, all right, if I'm going to have this, career or well-rounded career, I need to learn how to sell. Yeah. So I moved to Detroit to do that.
Okay.
Very cold, especially in February. Yeah. But I think what was most interesting there is I learned about how to move the sale forward, and that was a big takeaway for me. Is there was not a tremendous amount of sales. It was a family-run organization, so it was first day. There's the office and a phone, literally. There wasn't sales training. There wasn't the internet was still kind of new. I'm dating myself here, and good, bad, or indifferent. My supervisor was had just his last job was he had a career in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, so it was not a traditional sports seller.
Right.
So I was kind of left on my own to kind of figure it out, and that was my big takeaway from selling is how do you get to that point where, hey, I think we've got something here, and as a seller, how do you take it to the next step to closure?
Yeah,
it's that last 5 yards, right?
Yeah, and I think in the corporate world, what I've heard is the closest to the sale usually keeps the job.
Correct.
Because if you're out there learning how to produce and how to sell, you're a valuable asset that's not going anywhere. You're an income producer. And so I think that was a super smart move and take on your behalf as opposed to the buying, marketing, and buying leads. And
listen, they both have, there's certainly a need and a result from both of those, but again, looking at the long-term aspect of sports, being able to create revenue is going to be important.
Yeah, no, and I think when you moved to Detroit, especially with the Red Wings, did you have to learn Russian? Because some of those players' names where the vowels are all lined up in one
Konstantinov,
name.
Larionov, Lidstrom. I got them all. Trust me, I know.
It's like, man. And
Dominic Hasek.
Yeah, and they were loaded, man. They were a dominant team for many years up there. They ran the whole NHL for a while.
So my timing was not fantastic. I was in between Stanley Cups and had a lockout.
Oh, man.
But don't feel bad. Again, it was, as you think about some of these, I use the word perseverance quite a bit, and it's been something that's part of my life for some time, to break through and to get through and to figure these things out. We were talking pre-show a little bit about grit, and I think that's put yourselves in position to figure some stuff out. And having a lockout at a family-run business in Detroit, had only been there a year, and you don't have a product to sell.
Yeah.
Okay, you're showing up to work the next day, you're wondering whether is this still going to happen. So being able to put myself out there and say, raise my hand, hey, I'll sell group tickets. What do you want me to do for the Tigers? Family owned both organizations. Fox Theater, I'll go learn how to sell the Rockettes, like whatever. They just put me in, coach. I'll do whatever. So even though that was, again, didn't get a ring, didn't see a parade, but still was a good experience.
Well, and I think that says a lot because, as a lot of companies have really gone through, let's say, some downsizing over the course of the last year. Sure. One of the things I think that I've always looked at is how do you make yourself more valuable to an organization? That's exactly what you just described. At a young age, you're like, I'll go sell tickets to the Rockettes. I'll sell group pairings over to the Tigers. Whatever it takes, like put me in. I've got talent. So.
Well, I know we're shifting gears here a little bit. This is a favorite one. So when I interview folks, especially junior people, love the resume, but I just kind of like, why are we here? Why are we talking?
Right.
why do you want to be part of this team? And beyond that, just encourage them, especially at a junior level. We're not hiring you to be the CEO or the commissioner. Now, someday, if we're going to be a good fit, we'll put you on a path to get there someday. Right. But those what I'm looking for are those attributes of being dependable, being committed, raising your hand to ask for more. Sometimes just being around.
Correct.
You're going to find opportunities that come to you, and you build a brand as being a dependable person. Like, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because there is a
wasn't on the script, but it was on the script.
I love this, by the way, because I think this is gross for all organizations. I am known in our organization, in our industry, for hiring people right out of college, a younger generation who I think is extremely talented. But I will tell you that there is this notion that you described that's like, hey, listen, there's not a disconnect. I don't want to say that, but there is this level of thought like, you're right, I'm not hiring you to be the CEO. That takes time, right? And when you can point to someone that goes, and that person's been here 15 years, right? You've been here 15 minutes. It takes time. There's a path, right? I think that is important, because sometimes I always joke, I'm like, you don't go from delivering truck or being a delivery guy at FedEx to being Fred Smith. Right. It doesn't happen. Right. Not like that.
I've told my 16-year-old, a couple things. Three things. Interview the interviewer. Mm-hmm. Number 2,
love that one.
Remember, as you are looking at that person, think about how they got there. Chances are, again, I'm dating myself.
That's all right.
Probably looked up a phone number to get their first, remember that? A phone book. And again, I'm not saying like you got to just, go, real old school here, but respect and have some presence and acknowledgement of how that person got to be in their position. Mm-hmm. They didn't Google it.
That's correct.
And then, third, this notion of, those entry-level positions are, GPAs is great. All the the job history is fantastic, but it really comes down to, can you be dependable? Do you want to be here, and why? And in our business, loving golf and wanting to play golf is not the answer.
Oh, there it is.
So for those of you that are listening, there's your first tip.
Yeah. We're not looking for a fan.
I'm not looking for a golfer.
I'm
we got
for
plenty
a
of
business
those.
Person, right?
Anyways.
Yeah, no, this is great, because I think that maybe if I love those. I'll add a fourth one to it, and dating myself here. My father-in-law was a director at FedEx. Okay. And they bought a company called Flying Tigers. And so Flying Tigers, you probably know that.
Oh, yeah.
He was a director at Flying Tigers. They moved him to Memphis. Culture shock for their families. They went from the West Coast to Memphis, Tennessee. And he was a director still. But he always told me, he said, Quentin, no matter who you interview with, the next day, no matter what it costs, drop an overnight thank you card. Put the thank you card in overnight, and it will hit their desk. And here's the thing. It will make it past the guard gate. The keeper will have to put it on their desk because it has that person's name, and it's overnight. When they open it up and they see this thank you note, they're going to be like, dude, this person really wanted me to have this, and look at the initiative they took to get it in here. He goes, it will scream, holy cow, this dude's on it. And
especially now.
Especially now.
It has 3 or 4 sentences, and if that person's like, all right, they bought a stamp. Like, where do you even? Where do you go? That's effort.
Right.
Anyways,
so no, that's great stuff. That's great stuff. So the transition out of Detroit made your way over to the marketing side of things for the tour.
Yeah. So good question. So we went to Detroit for my wife, who I know you know well. Mm-hmm. She was in the automotive advertising business and was in a position to lead up the Lincoln Mercury. It's a great place to be. So she was in the Y&R companies, and so. Had done that for about 3 years, and it's like, okay, where do you want to go? And let's start a family and figure all that out. As great as Detroit, the suburbs are, and they really are. It is a fun place to be. Although I think its reputation is maybe a little overblown and outside that area. Anyway, so I knew I wanted to work for a league at that point. So the idea of league business, league level, commercial opportunities. Was something that I wanted to pursue. So I interviewed with the NBA, NFL, PGA Tour for opportunities that were in New York. At least I thought they were in the case of the tour. And fortunately, when they said we have this opportunity in Ponte Vedra, which at the time I couldn't pronounce. I couldn't even find.
How many times did you mess it up? Yeah, Ponte Verde. How many times have you messed that up? I know I did when I first got here. Yep. So made your way down here to Ponte Vedra, made your way and started in sales in 2010, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so selling, basically marketing, what you've been doing at this point, basically corporate memberships, corporate sponsorship,
Sponsorships,
and then selling merch and selling experiences at that point.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique model from a league perspective. So I supported a person who was our lead salesperson selling title sponsors. FedEx, St. Jude Championship is one, and official marketing partners. The official blah 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 of the PGA Tour. We have 65 of them currently. So
just a few.
Did that, and ultimately moved into a licensing role. So it was again putting our mark on things. It was an opportunity to kind of own an area of the business, and did that on our for about 4 or 5 years before moving to the Players.
Yeah, and then 2016, you become the executive director of the Players, and man, world changes at that point, I imagine, because it is all hands on deck. And when does planning for something like that start? I mean, obviously planning is year round, but when is it like, hey, the rubber meets the road, it's go time?
It's a pretty wild thing. I think just the fact that it's a temporary, start with the fact that it's a temporary environment. So we choose to build out the experience for guests, our players, our proud partners, whoever they may be, every year. Like it's not bricks and mortar. It's not a stadium.
Right.
So
even though it feels like it sometimes.
Even though it feels like it sometimes.
Definitely feels like it.
So when we've evolved quite a bit. I mean, the total footprint, we had our largest build ever this year. So from a staging perspective, it's enormous. It's a major championship in Jacksonville every year. Whereas some of the other majors are, they're rotating, if you will. So just again, from a magnitude perspective, it's a pretty big deal. And so we've kind of moved to this. We're talking 3-5 years in advance at any one point in time. So the answer to your question is we start putting, product starts loading into our parking lot on about October 15th, give or take. So we just if you do the math, like we just ended in March.
In March.
And so you need to decide what you're building, what you've sold, and where you're going to end up by the following March, by October 15th. So it's this perpetual. Again, the other joke is, do you take the next month off? Like, month off?
No, that's full time.
No,
man. We don't stop. We don't stop.
But it's great. It's great. It's great. There's a lot of tailwinds, a lot of enthusiasm for the property, and we're gonna take advantage of that.
How do you continue to raise the bar every year for the experience? Like, I mean, how do you guys do it? Because I've gone for many years. I've got a different experience every year, and I've also participated in different areas. But every year, it feels like the bar is raised.
3 things: the organization prioritizing this event and getting behind it, and putting, again, the full talent of the PGA Tour in all of our operating areas behind the tour's flagship event. I can get into all that if you want. But I think just over the course of the last 5 to 6 years, to see the company and our volunteers, get behind it at an increasing level is you're seeing the dividends of that.
How many volunteers does it take to run that?
So it's about 2,000. So we have about 2,000 volunteers, and they'll do everything from, ecology.
Yeah.
Which is a fancy way of saying trash, which is a true story, to feeding volunteers in our, in our commissary areas, to player services. I mean, there's, 60 different committees. It's endless, but
2,000 people.
I think what makes our group great is it's a recurring event. Again, it's a recurring major championship in the same city. The only other, there's 2 other events that have been around a little bit longer. It's the Masters and it's the Memorial up in Columbus, but we're all basically 50 years old, plus or minus. So to have that recurring group of volunteers coming back, passing it down generationally, it makes a big difference, because we're accountable to our players, the athletes and their families, as well as our sponsors, and making sure that those groups have a great experience, pretty critical.
Yeah, and I know there's been a couple of changes as far as the date. March, May, March, back and forth. Which one do you like better?
March.
March. What's the reasoning behind that?
Because I originally liked May.
Okay, well, is that simple?
I fought for May. I was like, we've again, this is, again, pre-show we talked a little bit about the topic of disruption and industry change, whatever it is. We were talking a little bit about grocery and Amazon. Point is, at the time, I felt very comfortable with, I was in a sales lead at that time, and this is kind of, I think, where we had an organizational shift from working hard to manage the status quo versus working hard to change the industry.
Okay.
And that's probably not said exactly right, but I think you get the idea.
Sure.
in May we had gotten into this. Okay, we figured it out. We figured out how to build things in the shade, and throw a lot of air conditioning out there, and keep the drinks colder. And Mother's Day was a big hang. Okay, so we embraced it, and our players were all themed in pink, and we had charitable tie-ins, and winners were thanking their moms. Like, hey, we got it. We kind of figured this thing out. And so that disruption of saying, all right, well, March, first quarter, great time when you're
trying to get sponsors. You're trying to get the money is not spent yet; it's still allocated, so that's a big
great time of year. Unencumbered, so we have from a competitive perspective, it's the conference championships in basketball.
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's about it.
You have snow across barely getting out of that across half the country. And then from a competitive perspective, overseeding, I'm going to talk about grass, don't lose me here, is the idea of planting cold weather grass over the top of warm weather grass.
Okay.
That's basically what it is. And so the property looks better. It plays as it was originally intended. So the course was designed for March.
Okay.
So the winds and weather patterns in March are different than they were in May.
Absolutely.
So when you start putting all of that together, March turned out pretty good.
Well, yeah, and you always get a wild card with that rain. I mean,
we did. We got a big wild card in 2022.
Yeah, it did, right? Yeah. And I feel like there was some other. I feel like 2021 on Friday again was a pour down, but it was early in the morning and it went all day. But you definitely get your wild cards there, and if that's intended how it's supposed to be played, then so be it.
So be it. Yeah.
So be it. But it's definitely from a competitive standpoint. It's also nice you have it right before the Masters too. Yeah. I think that's kind of cool as well as it goes into that. And kind of speaking about that, obviously going into the Masters, there is going to be a competitive field, a mixed bag of players in there. Yeah. What was it like? And I'm sure you were tied very tight to the conversation about it. What is it like when a competitor enters the market that's new, not really a threat, but wants to be a threat? How do you guys handle something like that?
Well, I think there's and our commissioner has made some great comments about how we've handled this at a very macro level. So I'll talk a little bit from a tournament operations perspective. Sure. What I think is insightful or beneficial to me as an operator is we have seen some of these seeds of change coming for quite some time. So
this didn't
but what I mean by that is how we are changing our business.
Okay. I see.
So if I can take a step back just to clarify that. So if you look back 4 or 5 years, and fast forward to 18 months ago, there has been a number of competitive changes, whether it's the organization, the schedule, the FedEx Cup points, and how those are built out. How we've brought in technology to our game. So there have been these, among other examples, how we have evolved our product over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think it's reasonable to say in the course of the last 18 months, we've accelerated some of the change that we organizationally have been talking about to combat that. And, there's again, other factors that contribute to it. A new broadcast relationship with NBC, CBS, and Golf Channel, as well as an ESPN Plus deal. Those partners believing in our product, our players saying, hey, we want to play for, legacy in the best markets and the best cities, including Jacksonville. Let's come together and figure out what's best for our fans and our business going forward. And I think you're, again, starting to see the results of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think for those that probably saw the Full Swing series, and that feels like everybody I know watched it. How big was that right before the Players Tournament that came out?
I think it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was a fun show. Quick aside, they were here quite a bit in 2022, but we had a lot of rain in 2020.
I noticed they kept showing the same clips over and over.
Yeah, so they kept going back to that. But all kidding aside, that's what you get, and kind of the unfettered access that the tour and our players agreed to as part of that is pretty interesting. So to see, again, as an operator, as a marketer, I know our players. I don't hang out with them, but I know them well enough to know some the personalities and whatever. My point is that to see them with cameras and being comfortable with cameras is pretty cool. The stories that are coming out about, that are really humanizing the players and their personalities is fantastic. And I think Joel Damon is probably your best example.
Couldn't agree more.
You're going to know a little bit about Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth beyond just their competitive, talents. But Joel Damon's a perfect example as why you do something like this. His story is fantastic. He talk about perseverance. And is a great personality, and the gallery's watching him. He was surprised. I mean, he's like, I never imagined.
He's
there's
I'm a celebrity.
Hundreds of people following him, if not more. So I think that's probably your true litmus test of the success of it.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I think that he was definitely a fan favorite in that episode. Yeah. But the cool thing about that going back to humanizing, I've got friends that could care less to watch golf. They're in episode 1 and they're like, I'm hooked. Yeah. When's the next tournament? Can we come down for the players? Yeah. And I think it brought a whole new fan base that probably never would have turned into golf, that are now going to watch it and also want to come to tournaments and experience and look for those things they saw in the episode, which is really cool, I think.
I agree. And to see, and again, not everyone's going to win open mic night, so there's fooling around, there's having fun, there's the Justin Jordan. I mean, they've known each other, they've been friends for 20 plus years, and it showed. So as we go, because we did announce Greenlining season 2 during Players Championship this year, we did make that announcement. So there will be a second season.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that'll they've already started well into shooting it. So to see some of that, I'm not saying bro down, but some of the bromance, whatever the words are, see some of that banter come out, and that's always fun and entertaining. But also, again, bring out a little bit more about how sometimes difficult and challenging it can be to be on tour. And certainly there's means that, and again, resources that allow some of these players convenience, travel and otherwise, but it is taxing on families and personal and all the things that they do in the course of the week. Sometimes I leave those behind the scenes shows thinking like, when do they have time to, call mom or dad,
right?
Or I don't know, even practice. I mean, seriously, beyond it being in a warming up in a competitive environment.
Right.
Yeah, they have less free time than I think we all realize.
Yeah, I think that showed, and I think that Tony Finau episode kind of screamed exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. And that was the talk of the town. A lot of people were discussing that amongst ourselves when we were there at the tournament, and I think that was one of the ones that stood out. So, and as going back to this this competitor, if I may.
Yep.
This is there anybody that you believe wants to come back and can come back from that, or is that line drawn in the sand?
Whether I believe it or not is somewhat immaterial. I mean, it's fair ultimately, I'm not, you'd have to ask them is kind of is somewhat of the answer. But, again, getting back to how Commissioner Monahan has set it up, that, there's not a path back for those that have chosen to go a different route. And I think in part, and he said this a little bit, is honoring or staying true to the players and the communities have said, I want to be a part of the PGA Tour. And that's who we're going to focus on, and that's what we're going to focus on developing as we go forward.
I think it's a great thing. I think there's a lot said about loyalty, and there's a lot said about wanting to build a legacy, right? And then chasing something else, right? And I think that, if you're chasing money, you're never going to have a career, and I think that's the old adage we've heard for years, and it probably showing up here in that decision as well. So, favorite TPC moment?
Oh, this is the unscripted part, right?
Yeah, this is the unscripted part. I've always wondered, I was like, from your position, favorite TPC moment?
Oh, wow. Sunday night at 6:30.
Okay, every Sunday when you're presenting the trophy, it's
exactly. That's a great question. So there's a lot of fun behind the closure of it, and I don't mean like, okay, thank goodness it's over, but the culmination of knowing how hard people have worked to pull it off, and to see fans have a great time.
I agree.
To see our volunteers be incredibly proud about what we can do for charity, to see the player and their family super stoked and excited. all the reasons why you get involved, to hear over the course of the week how, business deals have gotten done and, old friends saw one another and had a great time with my kid, got autographs. Like, all that kind of comes together at that moment on Sunday night. And it's this, again, I don't know what it's like to, win the World Series or to make that final putt like Scotty Scheffler. But in our business, we do what we do for all of those reasons.
Well said.
And that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think I always like hearing people's favorite part of the tournament or their moment. I always call it their TPC moment, and everybody has one. Such and such gave me this ball, or I got a high five, or if you're there on Tuesday, the autographs. And I've always appreciated how like this tournament, the players embrace that as well. Like, I mean, they're like, yeah, we're gonna go have a great time on on Tuesday, and we're gonna sign. And they always make sure all the kids get taken care of, and everybody has a really cool time out there. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I think when Carter was like, I'm going to say like 6 years old, the year, what year did Tiger win it? 2016?
He won in,
the last time he won.
Yeah, 16. Yeah, 16.
So, it's
the second time.
Yeah, so it's the Saturday of this, and my son, obviously, like a lot of people, wanted to see Tiger. Yeah. So we walk up to I think it was like hole 6, and we're like, we're just gonna pick up here and we'll follow the thousands of people that are following him. So we're pushing our way to the green. And I think Tiger has like a security guard that walks with him.
He does.
So the security guard,
correct.
The security guard, which is a bigger man, sees that my son is trying to look over people my size and your size, and he's like, "Hey, is that your boy?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Get him up here to the ropes real quick." And I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, and he pulls him under the ropes, and he goes, "Right here, two rules: no autographs, no high fives." 6-year-old, okay, doesn't understand what's going on. And Tiger hits a significant birdie, and he points to the security guard, and the security guard goes, "Okay." He wants to know, are you okay with your son going to the next green? You can't go, but I'll take him. And I'm like,
you're right, I haven't heard this story.
I looked at my wife and I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah. He's like, just follow from behind, but I can't do this. I can't pull you out there. Okay, no problem. So we're racing to get to the green. So he gets Carter up to the green, and then this time, instead of being like by the ropes, he is on the green, significantly on the green at this point. Tiger sinks another birdie, much closer, but sinks another one. Point again. We go to the next hole. This whole thing continues for 3 holes as he hits these birdies. And then he finally pars a hole, and he walks up to my son. I'll never forget, I'm right there, puts his hand on his head, rubs his hat, and goes, "Great run, man. I appreciate it all." And walks right on by. And it was
awesome.
so cool, for my son to experience that. And we were getting phone calls from family. Is Carter on the green of...
Is he supposed to be there?
Did he get under the ropes at the TPC? And it was just like, yeah, it was a cool moment. It was a really cool moment. And for Tiger to acknowledge that. And then he was paired with DJ that day. So it was even, you got the best of both worlds right there at that time.
You're right. You had not shared that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was an amazing story. But I think it kind of speaks to the character of some of these people behind the scenes that you don't get to see, these huge powerhouses. And it was a really cool moment. And everybody has a story at some level like that with a player. And I think that's what makes the TPC so special.
It's great it's awesome for our community. And, for those that, haven't been before, that don't live here, I mean, that's a perfect example of, how engaging and endearing our players can be. And again, not everybody's like that. I mean, they are working, by the way, but, the atmosphere here, and just kind of the way the property is laid out, is not only great for fans, but gives our players an opportunity to engage with fans. So that's awesome.
It's very, very cool. It's it was a moment.
You still have the hat?
Yeah, it wasn't. Hat that he touched. Yeah, he also got DJ's glove and a couple other things afterwards, and that's a whole other thing. But it was really, really cool, and just a in my opinion, a special moment.
That's cool
for him, obviously for us too, but especially for him.
That's great.
Well, Jared, we always wrap up the show with one question, final question here. What's your one more? Name of the show. What's your one more thing you're looking to accomplish? What's your one more thing that you're looking to next step or accomplish or pass on?
That's a tough one. Yeah. And I know it was coming.
Here was
I could have done the business side of it. And again, we were talking a little bit pre-show. So here's what I would answer it. I would say I wish I could do read a bedtime story to my kids one more time. And, but I think, and when I think about that moment, I think it really ties into, priorities in life, being in the moment, being present, again, personally or professionally.
So true.
And realizing that, which I love the question, is there may not be that again. So are you present? Are you engaged? Are you intentional? And take the time to do those things. So I'm not to get all sappy here at the end.
I think we could all use that.
But the idea of being, intentional and a little bit more present is the parallel I'm trying.
Yeah, and I think we all can have a little bit more of that in our lives,
Sure.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think that we both got kids in very similar ages.
Yeah.
Actually, we got one of each that's the exact same age, and two, they're about a year apart. But I totally agree with you and understand exactly where you're coming from on that. So thanks for sharing that. Also, thanks for being on the show today. Appreciate your time. I know you got to get on the road and get to the Masters here. Have a wonderful time at that. Do you have a player that you're picking to win this one?
Ooh, that's a good question. Hard to not pick the Players Champion, Scotty Scheffler. He went up north after he won Players to get a quick practice round. So he's the hot hand. I know it's not some big breakthrough, but hard not to look for him.
It's probably I think it's the conservative / popular pick right now. So totally
I'll go with that.
Absolutely, Jared. Thanks for being on the show again. If you like what you're hearing, please share the podcast, 5-star rate us, leave us a comment on here. Check us out on our socials at What's Your One More with the number 1. Jared, thank you again. Appreciate your time and just appreciate you having me on the show.
Awesome. Be good.
I got one more shot, I'm gonna make it. One more chance, I'm gonna take it. I meant it when I said it, now it's time for me to do it. I got one life to live, so I put my all into it, yeah.